Yo, yo, yo. I am here from my backyard on location. Just trying to play with the sound a little bit. But I'll try to keep you guys occupied until our guests come on. Today, we rocking with the homie Joe L, who just checked in. What's up, sir? I'm about to add you in now. We are live from my backyard. How you doing, bro?
I'm doing wonderful, bro. I want to be
That's good.
like you in the backyard right now, but it's too goddamn windy outside, so I can't pull this off at the moment.
Bro, the wind has picked up. It's crazy. It was like calm and chill, and now it's just like hurricane. But I can't complain. I cannot complain, bro. It's about 90 here. Not bad. How's it where you are?
For some reason it cooled down today. I don't know what kind of system it's blowing through, so it's like 75, but with a humidity of
Ooh.
like 90.
Okay. Okay, yeah. How, do I sound okay?
No, I hear you good.
Okay, good. Because it keeps cutting out on my end. So
Oh, no, I hear you good.
okay, so Jerry hasn't tagged in yet, but that doesn't mean we can't start our topic. And of course, our topic is the controversial overturning of Roe versus Wade. So, sir, any initial comments before we deep dive into this? Like when you first heard the news, what did you think? Like
Women honestly,
yeah.
women are going to murder us within the next 20 years. All of us. That's what I thought. I was like, we're going to pay so fucking hard for this. I can just tell. But then the second thought was, why does reality want to follow fiction so badly? And I say that because if you think about it, some of the most prominent fictional stories from the 20th century were all based on losing rights and freedoms. And bit by bit, we've been going through that. You know, like you have 1984, for example. I mean, one of the most obvious for right now is The Handmaid's Tale.
Okay,
And
yeah, I just heard about that.
yeah, and it's just that we constantly think of a future where the things that we take for granted right now will then be used against us. And then slowly but surely reality starts making that happen. So that whole point for that decision at the time when it was first made was an expression of women's rights to be able to decide themselves what should happen within their body after basically a historical blackout of men always controlling everything that women do.
Mm.
We don't have any real recorded historical proof that, at least in this country, women were always going to be fine. And so now when you take something like this off, which is basically nothing than a political and a capitalistic move, it takes all the humanity out of it, and where does it leave us? And so it's very scary what that reality is, because if they can do that against basically the second largest group, actually, let me take that back, against the largest group in the country. Women are the largest group in the country. They did that against the majority.
Right. They said 64% of all people, not just women. I'm sure the number was a lot higher for women, but 64% across both genders agree with pro-choice. And I think a lot of people got fucked with this, man. Like 60% of women who get abortions.
Oh, wait, Dev? Uh-oh. I think you might have called out for a second. Hello?
It didn't frame itself the way that a lot of people made it seem. Like a lot of those women, 60% of those women were women who already had a child or two, and they couldn't afford to take care of it anymore. So what they did was they said that the business decision, the rational thing to do, would be to have an abortion and spare myself and the child a compromised upbringing. But you listen to a lot of these people, you think that it's women in the street, with hangers in their crotch, just aborting babies every day. And it's just not like that. It's like they took this extreme conservative propaganda and they just ran with it. So
But
what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say though, when have you seen the opposite of that scenario happening whenever it comes to what changes we face as a society? It's always a strong conservative extreme
Mm-hmm.
that they focus on, scare everyone into groupthink, and then let it fall where it may fall.
Right.
It's a tactic that's always used precisely with good timing. That's something that Democrats never seem to understand. It's not just that the Republicans know how to fight dirty and how to shit on everything. They also know how to pick a really good time to fuck with you.
Yep.
Because then they know that you couldn't do much about it in the first place, and it'll cost too much time to reverse what just happened.
See, that's the one thing I will give the Republican Party is that they know how to fucking play politics, bro. Like Democrats, they get in office and they just shit the bed. They don't do shit. They just sit there and they nest and they wait for the next cycle to come around. When the Republicans take majority, they get busy. They get to work, and then everybody's like, well, what the fuck happened? Well, bro, if you guys didn't have your hand up your ass, you could have gotten some things done. So my takeaway from what's going on here now is, where do we go from here? Because the whole thing is, when due process became a thing in 1868, there were other things that were not involved with that. Same-sex marriage, interracial marriage. Is Roe v. Wade, the overturning of that, just the beginning of what's to come?
It can feel like that, but I mean, honestly, we have to start with the basics. Like, people in general got to learn to take better responsibility for themselves. And it's time that we stop lying about what that really means, because we haven't been doing a really good job with that for a very, very long time. And it's honestly only until our generation that self-awareness has been such a key in understanding why we have the problems that we have today. And I understand that for a lot of people, there's too much information in the world, and there's too much information to deal with on a daily basis.
Yes.
And it becomes, how do I put this?
Well, no, you're right. You're right, bro. The kids now, they have way too much access to information. You and I, we had to pull it out ourselves and learn from our experiences or other people.
Exactly. Like, I've been telling myself in general that we as human beings need a new relationship to language, because we have been raised with language that is definitive yet simplistic. And that's where all our words become inclusive. All, those people, everybody, that kind of stuff. And then the rest of us say it so casually, but we don't even really understand what that means, let alone, we don't have a realistic idea about what those words truly come down to when it's all said and done. Why do we always say all men and all women, when honestly speaking, not only in this country would none of us ever meet all of those people, but in the world where billions of them exist, that wouldn't happen either. And then on top of that, you got to take into account that because all of our experiences are different and all the ways that we have lived through life are different, we were taught that those experiences mean something and don't mean something at the same time. So people believe they have the right to go into the world and say that my experience is the standard. You all have to apply by that.
Yep.
And yet at the same time, because everybody's doing that and most people stick to the standards that were created by institutions that existed far before they got on this planet, like church, like the government, These are all rules of society, but they're rules made by dead people who don't exist anymore, and we're still upholding them, but not really asking why, and then not paying attention to how much pain and trauma is causing us, let alone to the people that we create. And then we don't have the words to express or explain why things become what they come because we don't even understand it ourselves. But we want children to be this de facto number one resource that we create. We don't even take care of them properly. I don't understand why I should have to argue with another human being about what the creation of life really means when I can see a little dirtbag kids and see that they wasn't going to do a good job in the first place. I don't understand why I'm supposed to give a shit about somebody else's opinions about whether or not a zygote is a living human being. When at the end of the day, if I look at your Twitter account, you're very close to child porn. So I don't know why you're concerned about a zygote. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's so many things about the way that we interact in life and the way that we envision life to be. And it doesn't add up to the arguments because the arguments are just somebody else's words. They hardly ever sound like the thing that people really put thought into before they express themselves.
Yeah.
And then it's no wonder why something like the Supreme Court could exist to just overall change their minds about what a standard is based on their opinions without taking into account any of the people it would actually harm and involve. On top of the fact that they're so, I don't want to say distant, they're not even a part of us. They don't relate to us in any kind of way, but they get to decide things for us on a whole. And you have to be realistic about how scary that is, that almost, I guess, 8 to 10 individuals can basically decide the fate of millions of people based off whether or not they believe that we're properly doing what we can, when in reality, in truth, we're not. We don't take birth control seriously. We don't take contraceptives seriously.
No.
We don't take vasectomies seriously. We could have been doing a lot of things to change the way that we understand what children mean in this country, because children really are the best resource that we can ever create. But as with anything else, if you misuse it improperly, it's no longer a good resource. And that's what I feel like that fear mongering comes from. The idea that, like, all these people out here can have all these kids, not take care of them, like drain the economy for all these things that they need. And then everybody else is just going to be screwed. That hasn't happened yet.
See, and that's the thing for me.
It's a good story.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but that's the thing for me. There are over 400,000 kids in the foster care system in the United States. And unless that baby is blonde hair, blue eye, nobody wants it. If it's a oh, what's up? Here he comes, Jerry. What's up, bro? Are you driving?
Yeah,
are you
man,
in the
you know
whip?
what? I thought I'd be. I'm in the whip, man. I'm in the middle of moving.
This is irresponsible, bro. You should not be podcasting and driving.
Call the police. Call the police, man. Call the police.
Well, you guys haven't been formally introduced, but Jerry, this is my brother Joel, and Joel, this is my boy Jerry.
Jerry, how you doing, man?
So,
respect,
Jerry, just to catch you up a bit, we're talking about Roe v. Wade, and we were moving into some thoughts on that. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so I don't have a lot of time. I'm driving back home, so I'm just gonna cut to what my thoughts are. I think that people, you know, we're seeing the erosion of the value of life, you know, and everybody's situation is different. And to me, all that Roe v. Wade being overturned represents is being more responsible when it comes to pregnancies. You know, you can't just have abortion clinics like Tim Hortons or like Walmart's where you just go in and it's just like, okay, like I think the statistics are majority of the procedures or the abortions that are done out of just sheer convenience. And to me, that's really irresponsible. You know, if you don't want to have a baby, then use contraception. Don't be going out there having unprotected sex and thinking, oh, I'll just get an abortion. It's really irresponsible. You know, so that's kind of where my head's at. Is like, you know, I agree that the Supreme Court made the right decision to not make it a constitutional right, but make people, couples, women more accountable for their actions.
Well, I mean, where I go with that is, I think we're placing a lot of responsibility on women. When I've never met a man in my life where a woman said you could hit raw and he didn't take advantage of it. I mean, like for me, it's like women take accountability. You're right, you know, but a lot of abortions are first time abortions. They're not. I thought that it was the smoke culture. I did the research. I went to the CDC.com, and the majority of abortions are first time abortions. Now, what they should have done, instead of taking that away, they should have put in conditions. Maybe they should have put in a federal registry. So when you go get an abortion, you're in a registry. So now if you're going back for a second abortion and it wasn't medical and it was purely out of convenience, because we all know some girls who did it out of convenience for contraceptive purposes. So create a database. Start putting real comprehensive sexual education in schools. Start subsidizing or making birth control more affordable, because a lot of the women who get abortions
hold on. Making birth control more affordable. How about not having sex?
Oh, come on, Jay. That's not even realistic, bro. That's not realistic, bro.
That's not. First of all, wait, hold on. We can't even say that. We can't even say that, because here we are as three men talking about.
That's cap.
We are three men talking about Roe v. Wade, and we talking about accountability. You know, good and goddamn well, our kind don't have no sense of accountability at all. And matter of fact, let me put it to you like this. I'll say it like this: as somebody who's worked for the government for over 14 years, what people always dismiss is that, in general, the government's part is to help create a resource that enables and helps people overall. They can't control how you're going to use it, but it's supposed to be a resource that exists. Now, the other problem with that, though, is that once they create the resource, it is supposed to be an additional side met to help people utilize the resource properly. Because if you just let people do whatever the hell that they want to do, they will always find a loophole, and they will always find a way around things. But let's be realistic about where the loophole usually comes from. Us, men, we're the ones that create the loopholes all the fucking time. So I'm never dismissive of the fact that, yes, women have to be accountable. But if you say to just take abortion off the table, we're forgetting how many rapes happen yearly, how many molestations happen yearly, how many scenarios. And that's always higher than people think it is. Everybody thinks that generally what we're seeing out there is just a bunch of birds out here just letting niggas come in them raw, and now they out there popping out babies. That's not usually the higher case, bro. That's usually not the higher case. The higher case is the real fucked up shit you don't want to read about. The real higher case is the real fucked up shit that you wouldn't want to go and sit in a room with those people who had to deal with it when you find out that their daddy and their granddaddy ran a train on the daughter or something like that. That's not what you want to know, but that's literally what's happening out there.
The issue. That is not the majority. And I think in those situations, it's not even a question. What I have an issue with is, you know, you have couples, a girl go get pregnant by a dude, and then they break up, and she's like 6 months pregnant, and she go terminate the pregnancy. That's wrong.
But you can't terminate that pregnancy. See, that's the part that doesn't even make sense. You can't terminate a pregnancy that late.
Listen, here in Canada, I know of 3 girls off the top of my head terminated a pregnancy at 6 months.
If that, well, I'm not gonna argue with it, but I do know 2 things. Generally, if it's gonna be that late, their health is involved, and they were potentially going to be harmed.
It was out of pure convenience.
See, now that is fucked up. That's something wrong. That I can never get behind. Late term abortion without medical intervention, meaning her immediate health is in danger.
Yeah.
If that's not the case, then that's murder.
Okay, gentlemen, I'm sorry, but I really would like to partake more of this conversation. Yo, I'm a married man.
You double booked.
Happy life.
You double
Happy
booked.
life, happy life. I ain't trying to get.
You double booked, bro. I appreciate you coming through though, man.
Hey, man. Hey, come on, man. I'm moving.
Yo, okay, look. We'll link up again, and you and I will have a conversation about this.
Yo, bring Joel back, man. Bring Joel back.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
we're gonna do this. We're
Cool.
gonna do it
again.
Ain't no problem.
Yeah,
We're gonna do the remix.
Peace.
All right, peace.
Peace,
Take it easy, Jerry. All right.
You warned me too. You did.
I told you, man. It was yo. He's a good dude. He's conservative, but I think he's on the right side. But I figured it would make some interesting dialogue. So we'll remix it.
Well, see,
So-
it's funny though. Like, if I've heard so many points like Jerry's, and the problem with that point is they always exist in the extreme, but they're the last ones to know that.
Yeah.
And all right, even if I take his example, he knows 3 women who had late-term abortions.
Mhm.
Whatever the circumstances are, 3 versus millions doesn't really equate.
It doesn't matter.
And honestly, too, that is the problem with us in general. We are individuals who only know of certain scenarios and only know small amounts of people. Yet we
can't
think that
take
that
and
relates
go as
to
fact.
exactly, but we think that relates to millions upon millions. Like, one of the first things that you always understand when you go to school under any of the sciences and you have to start doing experiments is that you have a sample population and then you have the population. And in general, most of the things that we understand, especially when in regards to statistics, is due to sample populations and how the experiment thinks that that relates to the population overall.
Right.
Even in looking at the numbers from the CDC website about how many abortions are done and everything like that, it still doesn't account for why. It still doesn't account for what these circumstances were. It's easy to look at a number and think it tells you a whole story, but the number is just a number. That's not a story.
Right.
So it's just never really going to work like that. And I feel like that's what we keep forgetting. But he does have a point in going back to what we were talking about earlier, where it's the personal responsibility. And as a society, we really have failed ourselves on truly coming to terms with what personal responsibility actually means. I mean, let's be realistic. Raw sex is probably the best thing most of us are ever going to have in life. And honestly, I understand why so many people would be really willing to risk it all for it. However, at the end of the day, a child is a human being. And we create these human beings and act like it's no big deal. But it is. Like, we're proof as we sit here and try to figure out our problems that because 2 sets of people decided to have sex and then create somebody,
Right.
doesn't mean that they have what it takes to properly raise that child.
Exactly.
So we have these bodily functions that automatically create humans, but we don't have the skill sets to raise children. And that's just different. That's
right.
really, really different. And until we come to terms with a lot of these issues, break them down to their basic points and really try to understand where do we exist in the midst of all of that, we're going to constantly have this problem, number one. And then number 2, something like Roe v. Wade will just be a reminder that, like, if they can come for this, they can come for everything else that you take dearly too.
Right. See, and the thing is that what you just said hits the nail right on the head. It's not about do you want to have kids? It's about do you want to be a parent? And do you have the emotional intelligence and the maturity to raise a child? Because you know what? I think that my parents did a great job of raising me. However, there are a lot of things that I wish they could have done differently. And for Kinga and I, we don't have any children, but the thing has always been, can we raise that child with the love that it deserves? Can we raise that child with the direction that it deserves, with the support that it deserves? And it's always been I don't know kind of thing. And so when you're dealing with a child, I don't know ain't going to cut it. You need to want those kids, want to be a parent, and be willing to do whatever. And I'm too selfish to have a kid. I believe that I might be a competent parent. I believe that I could be, but would I be a great parent? I'm not sure. And that's the reason why I don't step forth and take that next step. You know,
Exactly.
and for a lot of people, like, and touching on the birth control thing, there's a lot of people in underprivileged communities that love fucking, but they just don't have access to the same reproductive health that you have in more affluent neighborhoods, more suburban neighborhoods. And those people, they ain't gonna stop fucking. You know,
No,
16-year-olds in in Marcy Project. Is Marcy Project still around?
no,
No, it's not around, but you know what I'm
it's not
saying?
gonna happen like that. But
They're,
see,
they're not gonna work like that.
it's
So
not.
they
But
need
see,
access to, contraception.
exactly. But you also made a good point in that if you go around the world, no matter what country you go to,
Mm.
the people with the most resources have the least amount of children.
Yep. Yep.
Why? Because they use their resources to give themselves time to build the things that they actually want.
Yep.
And then they invest in creating children when they want what they've already created to now last time,
Yep.
create a legacy. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
When you are poor, you don't have access to resources. You have access
Nope.
to pain on a daily basis.
Yep.
And what do you want to do when you're constantly in pain? You want a distraction. You want to take your mind off things. You want to feel good.
You want to
So
feel
what
good.
do poor people do a lot? Have a lot of sex.
They
What does
drink,
that
they
get them?
smoke, they
Children.
fuck.
Exactly. What does that get them? Children, because now they don't have the resources to properly manage what happens after you have all the sex. That's why we can see a lot of children in poor communities as opposed to rich communities.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make poor people bad? No, it doesn't. It
No.
makes them, I don't want to say, it doesn't make them uneducated and it doesn't make them stupid. What it makes them is a victim of their circumstances and also the villain of their own story if they're not careful,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
if they're not paying attention.
Yeah.
Like, we can't do anything about what's already been done as far as like how many people have had how many children and where they are in life and this and the third. Our goal is to make sure that the young people coming up today get better choices in how they can help add or subtract from that scenario on their own terms, not force them to do it, not convince them to do it. Like, you and I and Kinga, we are the same in that how many times have people just come up to us, when are y'all having kids?
Oh, bro.
When are y'all doing this? When are y'all doing that?
Can I get some grandbabies? Nah.
Exactly. Man. And again, gotta learn how to have a different relationship with language, because why is that a common thing that people think that they're supposed to say? Because our American society, from the birthers from the boomers age, they developed the society to focus on building up the society to create the next generation.
Right.
Fundamentally, one of the things that people believe Roe v. Wade is about right now is to give white people a chance to finally start procreating
and bring their numbers up.
They don't feel like they're being outdone by all groups of color.
Right.
And also to create another working class in the future. Because if, again, since poor people tend to be the most amount of people, if you continue to create scenarios where everyone has their back against the wall, when the time comes, you have a whole new batch of fresh workers.
Yep.
Fresh people who have no choices, but they're going to have to do what they're going to have to do. And that's the end of the story. That's how a lot of us got here, and that's how it's going to continue. The sad part about that is just simply, why do we not understand that these choices were made before and they already had severe consequences? Why do you want to repeat them now? Why do we not understand that for these old fogies to make these decisions for younger bodies, it's disrespectful in a way that cannot just be quantified? Because it's just like, why do old men get to decide what happens to women's bodies? Why is that a realistic thing in 2022, despite all the things that we know at this point?
Because I think no matter what, no matter how far we come, men still don't value a woman's intellect, her maturity, her ability to take care of herself. Like, a lot of young men I see, they think of women as children. You know, you look at a lot of the the black podcast spaces, it's all built on trying to shame a woman into accountability. You know, it's like all these clips that you see is all, what do you bring to the table? Or this is this, and what is this, and what is that? And it's like, can't you have meaningful dialogue, come together, come to an understanding, and instead of trying to pigeonhole someone into, oh, all black men are bad, oh, all women are bad, you ain't shit, you ain't shit. Instead of saying, okay, look, I'm a grown ass woman, and I have some old ass man who doesn't know me trying to tell me how to live my life. Like that in itself is something that I think a lot of people need to just sit back and ask themselves that. How do you, who has no idea who I am, where I come from, my circumstances, and you sure as shit ain't gonna fucking raise my kid when it's here, why do you get to determine what I do and how I continue to move throughout the course of my life?
Exactly. And see, that's why I was saying we need to get down to the basics of all of this. Because honestly, if we were going to solve this problem, then the first place it has to be dealt with is just how men think. We got to be honest with the fact that men think about women the same way Americans think about anybody not born in America. Fucking foreigner, what are you doing here? Why are you acting like you deserve what I got? You don't deserve what I got. Why are you getting special treatment for? You don't deserve that. Get out of here. Yeah, you look nice. You have nice things. You don't deserve them. I deserve the nice things that you got. You know what's funny? You know what's really, really funny about men? For instance, generally, for quite a number of men out here being heterosexual, trying to have dominance over women. One of the funniest things about men is they don't like to admit they don't know what the fuck they're talking about when it comes to women because of the way that they talk about women in relation to the men that they're dealing with. You can go on any porn site and read the comments. Straight hetero men worrying about the dick size of the man having sex with the woman on camera. And you got to ask yourself, how is this even possible? That literally, almost any time I have literally heard women talk out loud, especially sex workers, they're like, yeah, the people worried about dick the most is other men. And it's weird. And I'm like, yeah, it is weird. Because why did that become a norm? Why is there such a thing in our heads that literally, like, when women are talking about dudes, the first thing a dude gotta be like is like, oh, I got a bigger dick than him. Why is that even realistically a thing? It's literally, again, this old logic from a bunch of people who are dead, but somehow it got translated to our generations, and then it was combined with fear mongering. And literally everything that we're doing is from a view of power and fear. If women are empowered, men fear women won't require us anymore, which is already what they see. Because a lot of women can now take care of themselves in a way that the laws did not allow them to previously. So then the fight that's existing right now comes from a sense of desperation that the men of today don't know where they're going to belong, and they already are in a space of longing to be a part of something, to connect with something, to have something. But instead of questioning, what can I do to find the best suitable place where I belong, they want to tell everybody else, you need to break down what you are so that you can be what I want you to be. And weirdly enough,
but I think that comes a lot from women too.
I was about to say that because weirdly enough, that is an issue that women have with men a lot. We're both talking to each other, but we're both using English, but we're not using the same language. That's the problem with the men and women in that kind of space. The communication styles are so vastly different that we think that we're saying something to each other, but we're not paying attention to the nuances. Our nuances as straight black men are very much different than the nuances for straight black women, straight white women, so forth and so on. And because most of the people who get involved don't actually have the range to express all the things that come with who they are, things get overlooked. And then when things get overlooked, it becomes an assumption that that's just the way it is, when that's not. There's a real reason as things are wherever they are. If Kinga, for instance, came out the gate from the very day that she mentioned, she's like, you could be around here, but don't you ever bring up a fucking kid. And you had kids on your mind from the very first day. You would have had to tell yourself, okay, well, she just told me she doesn't want to have kids. And you would have a choice. Should I take what she says seriously, or do I think I can convince her / coerce her? Which is usually the option that most people take when they think about it. Men and women, they believe that coercion is the best tool to get what they want. But then they don't see how harmful that is until it's done to them. And then all of a sudden, personally, they want to blame everybody else, but still not understanding how their views and attitudes also create the same scenarios for other people as well.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's like, we're not in a space of respect. We're in a space of demand. And as long as we stay in that space, the idea that like a woman's body belongs to her and she should be able to decide what she wants to do for herself, not the government, is always going to be on the table. As long as we're there, men will never see their part in the accountability of creating children. They will not see themselves as the monsters that have forced women to have babies without their consent or choice. They will not see themselves as people who have scared women into a space where they don't know how to tell people what's happening to them or what's going on. Until we get to that level of realization, we're always going to have these outlier scenarios where you're going to hear something as crazy as a 10-year-old can't get her abortion now because of the new rules.
Oh, you're talking about the young lady in Ohio?
Exactly. Yeah. But instead of worrying about like, why can't she get it? The first question that should have been asked is, why did this happen to a 10-year-old in the first place?
Right.
Why did we not protect that 10-year-old? Why do we not have circumstances to make sure that something like that would never happen to a 10-year-old in the first place? Why do we have men that think that's okay to do to a 10-year-old? If we're not going to come to terms with these basic facts first, we can't get to something as high as the Supreme Court ruling, because we're not paying attention to how they can minimize our lives and just say that this one rule works for everybody. We're in a different time now. We got to really, really think about what this different time means so we can stop being affected by this old school way of thinking that the government does, because they're going to be the last to catch up at all times.
Right.
They're trying to hold down a standard to keep peace and order under their assumed belief that that's what these things are. But peace and order have evolved severely since the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. But those people in the government come from those eras, and that's all they know. So all they ended up doing was time traveling. They still thinking the exact same things that they were when they were younger, but they have no relation to where we are in life and what kind of experiences we've had. So they just generally think it's all the same, because as soon as you see an extreme, you think that that's how it is all across the board.
Right.
You don't tell yourself anything other than a story that supports your fear. Right. And that's why we have this issue right now.
See, and that's the thing too. Like, I know they've been working on this for a while.
Yeah.
But I want to see the receipts. I want to see the mental health professionals that they spoke with, the physicians that they spoke with, because if you're going to make a decision like this, it can't just be rooted in politics and opinion. It has to be rooted in science and logic and fact. And the fact that they actually went through with this without showing the receipts kind of tells me, did they talk to people? Did they talk to the foremost mental health professionals in the country? Did they talk to the foremost general practitioners? Did they talk to the foremost gynecologists? You know, all of these different factors go into making a decision concerning someone's health and their well-being. Like, a lot of things that people don't talk about is that Jerry said he knew those 3 girls. However, when you pick up a girl from getting an abortion and she's in that car and she's out of it physically and mentally and she's depressed, people don't talk about that shit. They don't talk about the aftermath, the regret, the buyer's remorse of going through with something like that. And, you know, when you say that you know people who've done it, you've taken that anecdotal approach and you've applied it to like 10-year-olds. You've applied it to the 18-year-old girl at the college party. You've applied it to the girl jogging in the park. You eliminate all these people in order to kind of substantiate your opinion. And I know I got a little bit off course, but you need the mixing of the minds, and that's something that should have been broadcast publicly, so that people who don't understand, people in smaller communities, more conservative communities, who don't really get the broader picture, they can sit down and they can watch C-SPAN and they can watch all the evidence, because we can fucking watch Johnny Depp and Amber Heard for fucking 6 weeks, but we can't take the time to broadcast something that has a potential effect of all people. And what people need to realize is just because you're pro-choice does not mean that you're anti-life. They need to understand there's a nuance in that position.
Exactly. And then, so you made a good point. So you really didn't get off topic when you talked about like the anecdotal ideas that people have because they see someone in their lives and they think that one person or two people explain everybody else, and it obviously doesn't. But that's because it's hard to see a problem and then realize that if you want to know how far it goes, you'd have to sit back, do research, hear people's perspectives, really put in time and effort to get down to the bottom of it. It's easier to be an armchair general than it is to be realistic and just be like, I have no claims to this. I don't have the range for this topic. I don't really know what I'm talking about. I'm not the best person for this. I can't. No, nobody wants to do that. They want to be just able to say what they want, or they want to be able to have an opinion because that blends everything together. Because then it feels like no matter what happens, they're right somewhere down the line. And as long as that exists, they're not interested in the facts. They just want to be right.
Right.
And the problem with that logic at this point is simply that it's dismissive of every person's humanity. No different than I don't want cops to just indiscriminately shoot Black people just because they're Black due to their own fear of Black people. But I can't convince that group of people to understand that if they don't even recognize what their fear is. So I know automatically it's much easier to be like, no, just Black people are thugs and criminals. If I do that, then no matter what, somewhere down the line, I'm right.
Just comply.
Exactly. And then it goes right there. So it makes it easier to be like, oh, well, the only people who have, abortions are sluts and whores and those worst kind of women. And it's just like, but she didn't do it by herself.
She didn't do it by herself. Like, you know what? If you were a young lady and she talking about, nah, raw feel better. Raw, I like it raw. And you have your conviction, then you need to say, look, we either gonna wear this rubber or I'm going home. Like, there has to be, we're adults here. We can't pretend that we are not equally invested in what's gonna happen in this scenario. We gonna fuck. You getting something out of it, I'm getting something out of it. Exactly. So to say women need to take accountability, and like Jerry, I'm not trying to go in on Jerry because Jerry's a solid dude. Jerry's a good dude. But I think that as men, we need to stop blaming the fuck out of women for everything. We need to step back, because you know what? Throughout history, we've always said, women, they need to be guided. They need this. We need to take the lead. We need to protect, provide, all this other shit. But when it comes to this one thing, then it's, oh no. It's like, nah, women, you need to keep your legs closed. like that shit just doesn't make sense to me. So, I think that you're right. It's a bigger question. We need to learn how to communicate. Like, we always talk about communication. We need to learn how to actually communicate effectively with our partners, exactly. or people we plan on being intimate with.
Exactly. Especially because most people are out here doing shit with people they don't even fucking like. And that's honestly where a lot of that's honestly where a lot of the vitriol comes from. It's the fact that like Like even in your point you just made, like, you know, you about to smash somebody and she like, no, I want you to go raw. You be like, no, I need you to put on a condom or this is a no go. You know why so many dudes would be like, I'm gonna do it, but still, they gonna say that shit. Why? Because many men lack the awareness that they have a right to their body.
Yes.
To say,
yes,
I am comfortable with this or I'm not comfortable with this. But they don't pay attention to that part because they care more about the optics of living up to a standard of masculinity that somebody else created that doesn't have anything to do with him, and he hasn't put in the time to realistically figure out whether or not those rules really are something he abides by. Again, these issues are covered by other issues. The Roe v. Wade is not the main issue at hand. It's the way that we're handling things for ourselves first and foremost. That's the problem. Because if we were doing it on a much better context, regardless of whatever a Republican agenda is or anything of the sort, it wouldn't have been able to happen that way. But until we do take very, very seriously the notion that we're not being as socially and personally responsible as we're supposed to, they're going to keep bringing this nanny state ideal where they got to make choices for us because they can't trust us to make it for ourselves.
And that's the thing that gets me. Conservatives are always talking about we need less government, but they're cool with this. They didn't want overreach for vaccines. Oh, it's my body is my choice. But a young lady says, my body, my choice. Oh, no. We need the government to step in and handle this and regulate this. Like the hypocrisy is in that, you know, it has to be one way or the other. You either stay your ass out of my home, out of my bedroom, out of my business, out of my bank account, out of my body, or what are we even talking about here?
Exactly. And until we get to a place where we admit women are not equal to us and they're always going to be treated as second-class citizens, this is constantly going to blow up in our faces.
Yeah.
And one day we're going to cross a line that you cannot come back from, which I already believe this is.
Yep.
And there's nothing to talk about after that. Because when they decide to come for our necks, and they will, they're justified in it. Again, I look at the way that us as men have dealt with women the same way that white people have dealt with black people. And I always know that inherent fear to keep them subjugated always comes from a space of knowing in some way how they're being treated is fucked up because we wouldn't want it done to us.
That's a difficult one, Joel. Because, you know, I think there are a lot of more rational women who wouldn't act like that. I know there is a small group of women who would gladly take that liberty and make men pay physically, emotionally, mentally for some things that they perceive as injustice in the past. But, you know, that's a small minority of women. And, you know, I wouldn't say that I agree with feminism. However, as you can see by who I chose to marry, I do not shy away from a strong woman. You know, like I do not shy away from an opinionated woman, you know, so and I wouldn't say she's a feminist in any regard. I think she just understands her value as not only a woman but a human. And I think that's what we need to start to instill, because if we had a child, she'd be just like her. If we had a girl, it'd be just like her. And these young boys out here would be in fucking trouble.
But see, that's exactly my point though. Like, I'm not saying it as if like there's a whole group of women out there who are like incels and like just can't wait to like make men pay. Yeah, we already know that there's people like that. But I'm just talking about like the average woman who's already been fucked with so many different ways from Sunday. Like they're ticking time bombs too, not just us. And until we take that seriously, we're not paying attention to how many microaggressions they got to deal with on a daily basis. We're not paying attention to how many times they feel like they're in danger. I'm here in New York. I'm walking in the street all the time. Do you know how annoyed I get every fucking day that I'm out there because I'm walking and then some woman walks in the way like, oh my God, I'm so scared. And it's just like, I don't give a fuck about you. But that wasn't about me. That was about her learning through life. If men get too close to you in the street, be ready. Danger approaching. So that's the thing. I gotta pay attention to the storytelling I'm doing myself without facts.
Yeah.
And pay attention to the fact that someone's reality is always on display right in front of my face, whether I understand it or not. And for whatever reason, they're doing what it is that they're doing because they feel like that's what they should have to do in that moment.
Yeah.
And I can't dismiss that just simply because my mind has convinced me over time that this is supposed to be like this and that's supposed to be like that. It just doesn't matter after a while because everybody's personal experiences has something that you as a general person have no idea about and you're probably not ready to learn about either. And so that's why I try to at least remind myself we all have limits and none of us know when that final moment will come where you cannot let that limit be pushed against anymore. When you finally just snap and you got to do something about it. But to me, what's scarier than snapping is the okay. When people get pushed so many times that they're just like, okay, all right, that. Because when we get to that point, there's nothing left. When we get to that point, they don't care anymore about trying to find a way to do this and trying to find that. They're going to remove themselves from the situation and then steamroll their way through anything that is fucking with them because they're tired, they're done. And I just don't think that it's right at this point in life when we're talking about the rights of people and their emotions to keep dismissing how strong those emotions really are to the equation. Because if we don't respect people's emotions, if we don't respect people's ideals and ways of life, and I'm not saying that at the end of the day, all of them are good because they're not.
Right.
But the whole point is if you see something in someone and you know that they have a difference from you that you can't really get with, why are you going out of your way to interact with that? Why are you going out of your way to stir that pot? Why are you going out of your way to cause that problem, that person grief? Why? Because we were taught that life works a certain way, and our society's told us you have to be like this in order to be a functional member of society. If you're not like this, there's something wrong with you. And therefore, people decide on their own, well, that person looks like the kind of person that's not well for society. I should say something to them. I should do something about them. Why? It's not your place. It has nothing to do with you.
It's not your business.
These women figure things out for themselves. Let these women cook. Let these women live. They don't need us in their face deciding every fucking thing for them under the sun because this is not 500 years ago. If we built these standards in society, why are we not trusting them to do their own job? Because we know they're bullshit. Deep down, we know this is all bullshit. And I feel like that's the only reason the fight continues is because people just don't want to admit to doing wrong. Because if you admit to doing wrong, then that means you got to fix something. Ain't nobody trying to fix nothing.
Yeah, it's like I was talking to a young guy and he was like, he was talking about traditional roles and he equated traditional role to a natural role. And I'm telling him, I'm like, young man, human beings are hundreds of thousands of years old. While we were advancing and evolving, there was no kitchen. There was no ironing board. There was no laundry machine. Both couples or both genders did whatever they needed to do to make sure that they continue to thrive. And when you start to equate tradition with natural order, then you're basically taking everything off the table. Although you are a dishwasher, you are a cook, you are a breeder, your place is in the home, and you will not deviate from that. And I had a close friend growing up, and his mother gave up everything to raise the family. And once all the kids were adults, you could probably guess what happened. The man got tired of that and he dipped and he left. He only used her for what she could provide for him. And once she had no more use for her, He let her go. So what was the point of cementing all that time, creating all those bonds and all those memories? Or was it a bond at all? Or was it just a traditional, natural partnership that left her with nothing in the end?
Mm-hmm.
So,
and again, see, even with that like historical reference right then and there, it's like you're gonna have all these dudes talking real hotepish and really trying to be like, you know, woman's place this and this, that, and the third. And it'd be like, all you got is the experiences from watching your mother and the women in your life. And reading a couple of paragraphs from a couple hundred women on the internet in your lifetime. And you think you know some shit.
Yep.
And that's what I'm trying to say. It's like we giving people way too much credit that they never earned, and then they're gonna sit there and they're gonna talk about how the world is supposed to be. The fuck is you talking about, sir? There's no traditional, oh, woman's role is supposed to be this. Nah, because honestly speaking, even as is, you read history, women's roles in life have changed for various reasons depending on the countries, the groups of people, the issues that were going on at the time. You know what I'm saying? Like, we forget in this country that in World War II, since most of the men were going away, it was the women that kept this shit running. The most prosperous country in the fucking world. And the only reason they got to stay that way is because for at least 4 to 5 years, women was putting in that work and keeping shit going while their boys was out there getting shot. And as soon as the men came home, they was like, all right, all you hoes go back to where you belong. I ain't doing it no more.
Yep.
And they've been trying to hold it like that ever since. But it's just like, you can't dismiss the obvious. Like, they are right there in the trenches with us. Like, yes, you're going to meet some fucked up women out there. You're going to meet some asshole women out there. You're going to meet some dickhead women out there.
Yes,
but guess what? You meet the same versions of men, too.
Mm-hmm.
Ain't nothing different. That just means we all in the same struggle, but we're not supposed to be making each other's struggle worse than it needs to.
Exactly. That's
all I'm really saying at the end of that. It's just, I just want people to be more knowledgeable about where they are in the midst of all of this, because they think it's somebody else's problem, and it's not. It's all of our problem.
Well, sir, thank you again for coming on.
Course,
we're gonna have to remix this, right?
Oh, you already know. You already know.
We're going to
give it Jerry, so you already know.
We got to do it again with Jerry.
Yep.
But I thank you for coming on, man. I always appreciate your insight, brother.
Of course, bro. Thank you for having me. And we're going to talk about this one again, because I know this story is not going to die down anytime soon.
No, it's not. It's just going to keep compounding, and I can't wait, bro. So you be safe. You have your run for me, all right?
Same one too, bro. You enjoy yourself out there.
All right, bro.
All right, man. Talk to you. Peace.
Yo, y'all. That's another one. I thought I'd cut this one short because, we got to get Jerry in here. I'm sure it's going to get a little more spicy, and that's good. We need dialogue. We need to talk. Like, the whole basis of this is communication. It's all about communication. It's all about getting ideas out in the open and not being afraid of a difference of opinion, because right now in our world, that's one thing that's sorely lacking, is that you don't have people who can come from different backgrounds and be able to have a discussion without losing it, without losing the plot, because we're all in this shit together, whether you identify as conservative or liberal, no matter what your ethnicity is, we are in this shit together, and the decisions that we make impact one another. And I believe that if we can talk to each other and start to discuss some of these concepts in a more productive way, that we can start to create a society more balanced and more indicative of what we want to see and how we want to live, and how we want our children to live. Like I said, I don't have any kids, but and your kids are not my kids, but I still have an example that I need to provide. I still need to be a stand-up and respectful person, because They're always looking, they're always watching, they're always listening. Kids are sponges. We all say it. So we need to start to live in a way that teaches our children respect, dignity, honor, duty, and responsibility to not only themselves, but to society at large. So with that said, it's a beautiful evening. I'm gonna water my garden. I'm gonna have some food. I'm gonna chill, and I'm gonna schedule this thing out with the boys, and we're gonna see where we go. So thank you guys for joining again. If you have any comments, leave them. Please subscribe. Give us some ideas of what you might want us to talk about in the future. Peace.